A German shepherd crashed against the cage door. Blood dripped from its mouth. The officer grabbed his torn arm, screaming, "Kill it!" At that exact moment, a motorcycle pulled up. A man got off and stared at the dog. His face went pale. Keanu Reeves hadn't talked to a stranger in 12 years. But today he whispered two words that changed everything. "Wait, please." Keanu stood by his cabin window, watching the sunrise over the mountains. He was in his late 50s, tall and thin. His dark hair was now mixed with silver. A thick beard covered his face. He looked tired, carrying a sadness in his eyes that never left. He pulled on his old boots and leather jacket. After 12 years alone, he knew exactly what he needed from town. Coffee, rice, canned food, and fuel for his motorcycle. Nothing extra. Keanu had come to these mountains to hide. Life had taken too much from him. First, the people he loved died. Then Duke, his dog. After losing Duke, he couldn't stay in the world anymore. Everything reminded him of his failures. So he left everything behind and disappeared into the mountains. His old motorcycle started with a groan. The ride down was beautiful, but Keanu saw nothing. He only watched the road, his mind somewhere far away. He rode into the small town, timing his trip to avoid people. Tuesday mornings were usually safe. To reach the store, he had to pass the animal shelter. He hated that place. It reminded him of endings, of things he wanted to forget. He always looked away when he passed it. But today was different. A horrible sound cut through the air. It wasn't normal barking. It was raw and violent. The sound of a large animal throwing itself against metal. Then a man screamed in pain. Against every instinct, Keanu slowed down. He pulled over and turned off his engine. Two men stood near a truck by the shelter. One was Marcus, an animal control officer, holding his bleeding arm. The other was Raymond, the shelter director, a retired police captain. "That's it," Marcus yelled. "That thing is crazy. Put it down right now." Keanu got off his motorcycle and removed his helmet. He looked at the cage on the truck. A large German shepherd was throwing itself against the metal door. The hits made sickening sounds. But Keanu saw something others didn't. The dog's eyes weren't angry. They were wide with pure terror. Its ears were flat against its head. Its body shook, not with rage, but with deep fear. Between attacks, the dog looked up at the sky, like danger was coming from above. Keanu whispered to himself, "He's looking for threats from the high ground." Suddenly, the bright morning disappeared. Keanu was back on the Pacific Coast Highway, 12 years ago. Duke had come into his life through a program for veterans. It paired retired military dogs with people who could help them heal. Keanu had joined after his own losses left him empty inside. Duke was a beautiful German shepherd who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. But war had broken his mind. He would wake up screaming. Loud noises made him panic. Sometimes he would just freeze for hours. But Keanu was patient. He learned how to read Duke's body language. He learned Duke's triggers. He became the steady presence Duke needed. Over 3 years, Duke began to trust him. And in trusting Keanu, Duke gave him a reason to live again. Then came that day 12 years ago. They were riding along the coast when a fire truck passed with sirens blaring. The sound triggered Duke. His body went stiff. His eyes went wide. He started thrashing in the sidecar. Keanu reached over to calm him, taking his hand off the handlebars. He didn't see the delivery truck drifting into his lane. But Duke saw it. In one explosive movement, Duke jumped from the sidecar and hit Keanu in the chest, knocking him off the motorcycle onto the gravel. A second later, the truck hit the motorcycle, sending it spinning. Keanu survived with just scratches. Duke didn't make it. He died on the side of the road, his head in Keanu's lap. For 12 years, Keanu blamed himself. He thought it was his fault. The guilt became his constant companion, following him up the mountain and into his dreams. Now, watching this gray and white shepherd scan the sky, Keanu felt the past grab him by the throat. "Turn around," a voice in his head said. "Not your problem. Drive away." But the memory of Duke wouldn't let him leave. "Get the pole," Marcus yelled. "We're putting it down right here." Keanu's legs felt heavy, but he moved. He took a step toward Raymond. "Wait." It was the first word he had spoken to a stranger in over a year. The word hung in the air, rough from not being used. Marcus froze. Raymond turned his attention to the stranger. He knew this man. Everyone in town did, though few had ever spoken to him. Keanu Reeves, the movie star who had vanished over a decade ago. Keanu took a slow step forward. "Can I help you?" Raymond asked. Keanu's eyes stayed locked on the cage. The dog. Where did it come from? Owner surrender this morning, Raymond said. Guy said he was vicious. Looks like he was right. That thing is a monster. Marcus spat. It tried to take my arm off. It needs to be put down now. Keanu ignored him completely. He's not vicious. He's terrified. Raymond sighed. Son, terrified and vicious often look the same. I've been doing this for 20 years. That dog is beyond saving. He's dangerous to my staff. Heavy silence filled the air. Keanu looked from the dog to Raymond, then back to the dog. He felt the familiar weight pressing down on him. The same weight that had crushed him 12 years ago. The words came out before he could stop them. Let me try. Marcus laughed. Try what? Get yourself killed? The movie star wants to play hero now? What is this, some publicity stunt? Keanu didn't look at Marcus. His eyes stayed on Raymond. I know this kind of dog. I spent 3 years working with a military dog through a volunteer program. A dog just like this one. A dog with PTSD. The words changed everything. Marcus stopped laughing. Raymond saw the stranger in a new light. He saw how Keanu stood perfectly balanced, the stance of someone who knew how to stay calm under pressure. Military dogs, Raymond repeated slowly. He made a decision. Marcus, go to the clinic. Get that arm stitched. That's not a request. Marcus's face twisted. You can't just let some retired actor walk in here and take over. I said go. Raymond's voice had steel in it. Marcus glared at Keanu with pure anger. This isn't over. He turned and walked to his vehicle, slamming the door. Raymond turned back to Keanu. He's right about one thing. I can't officially let you in that cage. Insurance would shut me down. Keanu nodded. I don't need to go in. Just give me space. And do you have a stool? A simple wooden stool. Inside the office, Elaine, the young vet tech, watched through the blinds. She had taken this job because she believed every animal deserved a chance. She hated what usually came next, the needle, the quiet walk to the freezer. Now she watched as Raymond got an old 3-legged stool from storage. Keanu took the stool and walked to a spot about 10 feet from the cage. He sat down, turning his body partially away. His body language was completely neutral. The dog exploded with panic. Deep barking shook the metal walls. It lunged at the bars with heavy thuds. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't look at the dog. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a very old book. The cover was missing. The pages were yellow. He opened it and began to read. His eyes tracked the lines, but his whole being was focused on the animal 10 feet away. He was doing exactly what he'd been taught years ago. Being still, being patient, being safe. What is he doing? Elaine asked Raymond. That dog is going to give itself a heart attack. Raymond's eyes narrowed. He's not ignoring it. He's outlasting it. Watch. The shepherd's frantic rhythm began to break. It would lunge and bark, but get nothing back. No yelling, no threat. Just the scent of a calm man and the whisper of wind through trees. The furious barking became a low growl, then heavy panting. The dog slid onto its belly, head still up, eyes locked on the strange, quiet man. Confusion replaced terror. This human was breaking all the rules. Keanu sat there for over an hour. The sun climbed higher. He turned a few more pages. The only sounds were the distant highway and birds calling. Finally, Keanu slowly closed his book and stood. Every motion was slow and careful. The dog tensed, scrambling to its feet with a low growl starting. Keanu didn't look at it. He picked up the stool and walked back toward the office. He stopped in front of Raymond. That was something, Raymond said. What now? Keanu looked up toward the mountains, toward his cabin and his silence. Then he looked back at the cage. The dog had stopped growling. It was watching him with wide amber eyes, head tilted slightly. For just a moment, it looked less like a monster and more like what it truly was, a frightened, broken creature that had forgotten how to trust. Keanu's throat felt tight. I'll be back tomorrow, he said. He walked to his motorcycle, climbed on, and rode away without looking back. Raymond and Elaine stood in the doorway, watching until the motorcycle disappeared. In the cage, the gray and white shepherd lay down in the first true silence it had known in days. Its eyes never left the spot where the quiet man had been sitting. Something had shifted in its broken mind. Something small and fragile. It didn't know what to call it, but it was the first seed of something that might, given time and patience, grow into trust. Keanu returned the next morning as the sun cleared the mountains. His old motorcycle rumbled into the same spot. Raymond, drinking coffee by the door, gave a short nod. Keanu nodded back. No words were needed. Raymond had moved the shepherd into a separate cage away from other animals. The three-legged stool was waiting by the entrance. Elaine had placed it there the night before. The dog was already barking when Keanu arrived. The moment it saw the familiar motorcycle, the storm began. Deep barking filled the concrete hallway. Keanu did exactly what he'd done before. He placed the stool about 8 feet from the gate, sat down, turned his body away, and opened his book. The frantic barking continued for 15 minutes. Then it stopped. The shepherd backed away and lay in the far corner, but kept its head up, watching. This became their routine. On the second day, the barking lasted 15 minutes. On the third day, 10 minutes. By the fourth day, when Keanu arrived, the dog didn't lunge at all. It just stood at the back, tense and trembling, making a low, anxious sound. But it didn't attack. It watched. Each day, Keanu moved his stool closer. 8 feet became 6. 6 became 4. He was patient, never rushing. He understood that trust couldn't be forced. It had to be earned, one silent hour at a time. On the morning of the third day, something changed. Keanu had been sitting for nearly 2 hours when he slowly closed his book. He looked at the dog, not directly in the eyes, but at its ears, at the space around its head. The shepherd tensed, ready to spring. Keanu spoke for the first time since he started coming. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. He spoke German words, commands that military dogs knew. Sit. Sit. The dog's head snapped up. Its ears, which had been flat with fear, shot forward instantly. It was trying to locate something it recognized. Something buried deep beneath all the trauma. It didn't sit. It scrambled to its feet, confused, and let out a single sharp bark that was more a question than a threat. Keanu kept his voice low and calm. Sits. Gute Junge. Sit. Good boy. The shepherd's whole body became a question mark. It backed up until it hit the wall, then let out a confused whine. It knew those words. They were part of its earliest training, before the war, before the trauma, before everything broke. But hearing them now from this strange, quiet man created a conflict it didn't understand. Platz, Keanu murmured. Down. He remembered saying the same word to Duke in a shaking plane during turbulence. Feeling Duke's warm body pressed against his leg. Bleeb, Keanu whispered. Stay. He wasn't commanding this dog. He was speaking to the soldier trapped inside that terrified animal. He was using a language they both understood. The shepherd paced in tight circles, whining. Part of it wanted to obey. Deep inside, it remembered what those words meant. It remembered a time when following commands brought reward and purpose. But another part, the part that had been beaten and abandoned, screamed that humans couldn't be trusted. From the office window, Elaine watched. She saw the dog's reaction. She saw the war playing out in the animal's body, the fight between fear and recognition. She made a decision. She grabbed a thermos of fresh coffee and walked outside. Keanu heard her approach. His shoulders tensed slightly. Mr. Reeves, she said softly. I'm Elaine. I brought you coffee. You've been out here for hours. Keanu slowly turned his head. He saw the young woman, her face kind, her eyes filled with concern. He took the thermos. Thank you. Elaine glanced at the cage. The dog had stopped pacing. It was watching them both. I heard you, she said quietly. The German commands. I think you're right about him. And I think I know why. Keanu looked at her. Elaine lowered her voice. He was surrendered 5 days ago. The man who brought him in was awful. He dragged the dog by a chain and threw paperwork at us. Said the dog was broken. Said if we didn't take him, he'd shoot him himself. Keanu's jaw tightened. I'm the intake person, Elaine continued. I file paperwork, scan microchips. His chip was registered to a private security contractor. But there were documents the owner called useless garbage. She pulled a folded plastic sleeve from her pocket. These are his military discharge papers. Keanu's hands trembled as he took the sleeve. Through the plastic, he saw the Department of Defense emblem. He saw a military form like ones he'd seen during his years with the veteran program. He read the information. K9 ID number, S228. Name Shadow. Classification, military working dog. 3 tours of duty. Discharged 2019. Adopted out through official channels. He was a soldier, Elaine whispered, tears in her eyes. He served his country. He did everything they asked. And then he was adopted out to that man who did this to him. Keanu stared at the papers. A cold, slow anger began to replace the grief in his chest. He'd seen this before. Military dogs were heroes on the battlefield. They saved lives, detected bombs, protected their handlers with complete loyalty. But when they developed PTSD, when they couldn't perform anymore, they were sometimes thrown away. Passed from owner to owner until they broke completely. Marcus ran the man's license plates, Elaine added. He has a history. Animal neglect charges. A citation for leaving a dog in a hot car 3 years ago. Charges were dropped, but the record is there. She wiped her eyes. He beat that dog, Mr. Reeves. He took a hero and turned him into this. Keanu looked at Shadow. The shepherd lay in his corner, watching with those amber eyes that held so much pain. He wasn't just a dog. He wasn't just like Duke. He was a fellow veteran, betrayed by the very people he'd trusted. Thank you, Keanu said quietly. For the coffee and for this. He held up the papers. May I keep these? Elaine nodded. Of course. I made copies. Keanu turned back to the cage. He didn't look at Shadow directly. He simply sat back down on his stool, the discharge papers on his knee, and opened his book again. But he wasn't reading. He was thinking about soldiers. About the ones who came home broken. About the ones who were forgotten. About promises made and promises broken. He was thinking about Duke. And he was making a silent promise that this soldier, this four-legged veteran named Shadow, would not be abandoned again. The days that followed took on a gentle rhythm. Keanu would arrive each morning just after dawn. He would collect his stool, walk to the cage, and sit. He added new things to his routine. Small steps that pushed trust a little further each day. On the 5th morning, he extended his left hand and rested it against the chain-link fence. He didn't look at Shadow. He didn't speak. He just offered his scent, his presence, a calm invitation. Shadow's reaction was a war with himself. He would pace along the back wall, sniffing the air, letting out short, frustrated barks. But every day his curiosity won. He would creep closer, belly low to the ground, until he was just on the other side of the fence. He would stretch his neck out, his black nose twitching, sniffing near Keanu's hand. Then his fear would send him back to the corner. But each day he stayed a little longer. Keanu never moved. He never reached through the fence. He never tried to force contact. He just sat with his hand on the wire, waiting for the dog to make the choice on his own terms. On the 6th morning, something remarkable happened. Shadow had crept closer than ever before. His nose was just inches from Keanu's fingers. The dog's body trembled, caught between the desperate need for connection and the terror of being hurt again. Keanu didn't move. He barely breathed. Shadow stretched his neck out further. His black nose touched the fence, then pushed through a gap in the chain link. He sniffed Keanu's palm deeply. Then, in a gesture so small it could have been missed, Shadow's tongue darted out. He licked the fence where Keanu's hand rested. Just once. A tiny, careful touch. Then he scrambled backward, terrified by his own bravery, and retreated to his corner. Keanu let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His eyes stung, but he didn't move. He simply sat there for another hour, his hand on the gate, a silent promise that he wouldn't leave. That afternoon, Keanu brought something new. From a small cooler, he pulled out a foil packet. Air-dried liver cut into small pieces, the kind of treat working dogs loved. He didn't throw the food. He didn't try to force Shadow to take it. He simply knelt by the gate and spoke in that same low, calm tone. Gyuda Yunga. This is for you. This is yours. He slid the packet just inside the gate, placing it carefully on the concrete floor. Then he went back to his stool, picked up his book, and gave the dog the dignity of distance. Shadow stared at the packet. He stared at Keanu. He looked at the packet again, his nose twitching. He was clearly hungry. This smelled different. This smelled like reward, like the treats he'd earned in another life. But fear was stronger. He paced, whined, circled the packet without touching it. The standoff lasted over 2 hours. Keanu sat and read, never looking at the dog, never pressuring him. Finally, as the light began to fade, Keanu closed his book. He stood, put the stool by the wall, and walked to his motorcycle without looking back. The next morning, when Keanu arrived, the first thing he did was look at the cage. The foil packet was gone. In its place were tiny torn shreds, licked completely clean. Keanu allowed himself a small smile. It was the first time he'd smiled in longer than he could remember. But then everything changed. On the 8th morning, disaster struck. A massive storm hit during the night. Thunder cracked like explosions. To Shadow, trapped alone in his cage, it sounded exactly like the bombs from Afghanistan. The terrified dog threw himself against the cage door again and again. The latch, already weakened from days of abuse, finally broke. Shadow escaped into the storm and ran toward the mountains. When Marcus arrived the next morning and found Shadow gone, something inside him snapped. All his fear and anger came rushing back. He grabbed his rifle and went hunting. Elaine called Keanu in a panic. Shadow's gone. And Marcus has a gun. Keanu raced down the mountain on his motorcycle. When he arrived at the trail, he found Marcus with his rifle, Elaine trying to stop him, and Raymond rushing to help. What happened next would change all of them forever. After long, emotional conversations, Marcus finally put down his rifle. He broke down, admitting his own trauma and fear. Raymond convinced him to get help. But Shadow was still out there, alone and scared in the mountains. Keanu went after him. He climbed dangerous trails. He searched for hours. Finally, he found Shadow trapped at the bottom of a collapsed mine shaft, his leg badly injured. Without hesitation, Keanu climbed down into the dangerous hole. He freed Shadow's trapped leg. And together, using a makeshift harness and sheer determination, they climbed out. The journey down the mountain was slow and painful. Shadow could barely walk. But he stayed close to Keanu's side, trusting him completely. When they emerged from the trees, everyone was still waiting. Marcus, who had been Shadow's enemy, gave Keanu a medical kit to help the injured dog. 3 weeks later, Marcus returned to the shelter. He had withdrawn his complaint. He was getting help for his own trauma. Raymond offered Keanu a job at the shelter and a small cottage to live in. "You have a gift," Raymond said. "There are other dogs here who need you." Keanu accepted. 1 month later, the cottage had been transformed into a home. Shadow lay on the porch, his leg healed, his coat shiny, his eyes calm and content. But Keanu wasn't on the porch. He was inside the shelter, teaching a young veteran named Derek how to work with a traumatized dog. They had started a new program called Warriors and Friends. It paired traumatized veterans with traumatized animals. Both could heal together. "How long did it take you?" Derek asked. "With Shadow?" Keanu smiled. "Longer than it should have. But I had to learn the same lesson he did. We were both trapped by our pasts. We both had to learn that it was safe to trust again." Later, Elaine brought good news. The donation came through. The big one from your friend in Colorado. "Theo?" Keanu asked. "Yes. He said to tell you that Duke would be proud. And he's thinking about visiting if that's okay." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Theo, the man he'd abandoned 12 years ago. They'd been talking on the phone, slowly rebuilding their friendship. "Tell him he's welcome anytime," Keanu said. Outside, Shadow waited on the porch. When Keanu approached, the dog rose and walked down to meet him. His tail wagged slowly, a calm greeting that spoke of deep trust. Keanu knelt and placed his hand on Shadow's head. "We made it," he said softly. "Both of us. We actually made it." Shadow leaned into his touch, his amber eyes calm and happy. The newspaper wanted to do a story on the program. Keanu, who had hidden from the world for 12 years, agreed. "But the story isn't about me," he said. "It's about them. The dogs, the veterans, the second chances. That's what matters." The first official Warriors and Friends meeting took place the following week. 5 veterans sat in a circle, each with a rescued dog at their feet. Different stories, but the same journey, broken people finding healing through broken animals. Keanu stood at the front, Shadow beside him. "Everyone in this room has been told they were too broken to be fixed," he said. The dogs were told the same thing. "But here's what I've learned. Broken doesn't mean finished. Scared doesn't mean dangerous. And giving up is never the kindest option." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "We're all here because someone refused to give up on us. That's what we're building here. Not just a program. A family." When the meeting ended, Keanu stood alone in the empty room. The autumn sun streamed through the windows. Elaine appeared in the doorway. "How do you feel?" Keanu thought about the question. "I feel like I finally understand why Duke saved my life." "Why?" "Because this was what I was supposed to do. Not hide on a mountain. Not run from my pain. But use what I learned to help others. To save lives the way he saved mine." He looked out the window at the mountains where he'd once hidden, and at the shelter where he'd finally found his home. "I spent 12 years asking why things happened," he said. "But the point isn't why. The point is what we do afterward." Shadow appeared at Keanu's side, pressing against his leg. "Are you ready for the next session?" Elaine asked. "We have 3 more veterans starting next month." Keanu looked at her. He looked at Shadow. He looked at the future they were building together. Yes, he said, his voice filled with purpose. I'm ready. And he was. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to save someone else first. Sometimes broken things can be made whole again. And sometimes the quiet heroes are the ones who refuse to give up on themselves or on others. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today.